The church was silent, its tall stained-glass windows glowing faintly in the early morning sun. The pews were empty, save for one man who sat in the middle row, staring quietly at the cross that hung above the altar. It was John Kennedy, tough, sharp, known to millions as a man of quick wit and unshakable resolve. But in that moment, he wasn't the fiery senator or the skilled debater. He was a man searching for answers. And with a deep breath, he whispered the words that would later change the course of his life. "This is why I chose Christianity." Job had not grown up in a home where faith was front and center. His parents worked hard, focused on survival, on providing for their family. They believed in morals, in honesty, in discipline, but religion wasn't the anchor that guided their days. As a young boy, John would occasionally pass by churches on Sundays, hearing the hymns echoing through the walls, and he'd wonder what drew people in. But life had a way of moving too fast, and questions of faith were pushed aside for the demands of school, work, and eventually politics. For years, he'd lived that way, driven by ambition, relying on his intellect and determination to carve out his path, and it worked. He built a career, earned respect, and became a voice that people listened to. Yet even in his success, there were moments when silence would creep in. Nights where he'd sit alone, staring at the ceiling, and wonder, is this all there is? The turning point came not during victory, but during loss. Job had a close friend, a man he considered a brother, who fell gravely ill. John stood by his side through the hospital visits, the endless treatments, and finally, the quiet moments when medicine could do no more. One night, as his friend's strength faded, John expected fear, panic, maybe even anger. But instead, his friend smiled, whispered a prayer, and said, "I'm going home." That moment shook John to his core. How could someone face death with peace? Where did that strength come from? And why, in all his years of education and experience, had he never felt anything like it? After the funeral, John found himself restless. He'd walk the streets at night, questioning everything he thought he knew. The applause, the debates, the victory they suddenly felt hollow. One evening, he wandered past a small church, its doors still open. Something he couldn't explain what pulled him inside. He sat in the back pew, surrounded by strangers who were singing with tears in their eyes, hands lifted as though they were reaching for something beyond this world. For the first time, he felt a stirring in his heart, a warmth he hadn't known before. But choosing faith wasn't simple. John wrestled with doubts. Could he, a man of reason and law, believe in something he couldn't see? Could he surrender the idea that life was only about control, power, and intellect? Nights were filled with questions, and he kept searching reading scripture, talking to pastors, sitting in silence. Slowly, a pattern emerged. He realized that Christianity wasn't about blind belief, it was about love, forgiveness, and the grace that filled in where human strength failed. The real test came when Job himself faced hardship. Political storms battered his career, critics tore at his reputation, and personal struggles weighed on him heavier than ever before. In the past, he would have fought back with nothing but grit. But this time, he remembered his friend's words. He opened the Bible, fell to his knees, and prayed not for power, not for success, but for peace. And for the first time, he felt it, a peace that wasn't dependent on circumstance, a hope that wasn't tied to human approval, a love that reached deeper than any failure. That was the moment John knew. Christianity wasn't just a religion, it was an anchor in the storm, a light in the darkness, a truth that didn't waver. It gave him the strength to forgive when it was easier to hate, the courage to stand firm when compromise seemed tempting, and the humility to admit that even he needed grace. Years later, when people asked him why he chose Christianity, John didn't hesitate. He told them about the emptiness he once felt, about the peace he witnessed in his friend's final moments, about the night he walked into that little church and found something he hadn't even realized he was searching for. He told them that faith didn't make life easier, but it made life meaningful, and that meaning, that hope, was worth more than any victory in the halls of politics. In the end, John Kennedy's story wasn't about a politician choosing a faith it was about a man finding the one thing that all of us search for, a reason to believe, a place to belong, and a love that never lets go. And as he often said, with a steady voice and a heart full of conviction. This is why I chose Christianity. Not because it makes me perfect, but because it shows me grace when I'm not. Not because it gives me all the answers, but because it gives me hope when I have none. And that, my friends, is the greatest gift of all.